Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernest Jaffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. The Louisville Cardinals coaching search is finally over with. A lot of these college basketball coaching searches have been relatively down to one or two candidates. Looking at Michigan, it looked like Nate Oates might be a candidate, but then Alabama gave him a contract extension, and then Michigan ended up hiring Dusty May, which was a Louisville candidate. Then you had West Virginia, looked like possibly Mark Byington was a candidate for the job. Then they end up going with Darian DeVries. But with Louisville, this coaching search went a million different ways, with Richard Patino possibly going to Louisville and being the head coach after Rick Pitino, his father, was the head coach for Louisville for so long until the fallout with that. But Richard Pitino did not happen. You also had Bob Huggins even thrown around at the very end of the coaching search. I even did a Twitter poll earlier today asking people if they thought Bob Huggins would be a good choice for Louisville, and actually over 50% of people said yes. Bob Huggins wanted to become the head coach at Louisville, but Louisville definitely was not interested in Bob Huggins, because then Louisville immediately made the announcement that Pat Kelsey, the Charleston head basketball coach, is going to be the next head basketball coach of the Louisville Cardinals. And this came out of left field because Pat Kelsey was not really thought of to be a candidate for this job. Shaheen Holloway was also another name that Louisville was considering. Josh Schertz, the Indiana State coach, was a possibility. There were so many names for this job, it's absolutely unbelievable. But Louisville ended up settling on Pat Kelsey out of nowhere, and I don't think this is necessarily a bad hire. I know a lot of Louisville fans are very weary of this hire because Pat Kelsey is at a smaller school, but Dusty May was a candidate for the Louisville job as well, and he was also at a smaller school and never has had coaching experience at a bigger school. At least Richard Pitino would have had that under his belt, being the head coach of Minnesota in the past before going to New Mexico, but he was fired at Minnesota. But I'm going to go over whether Pat Kelsey is the right hire for the Louisville Cardinals and whether I believe he can succeed as the next Louisville basketball head coach. Now, Pat Kelsey, like I said before, has been the head coach of Charleston, but before that, he was the head coach of Winthrop. And you can look at it, well, Charleston's down in South Carolina. He's not even familiar with the Louisville area, but actually he is, because he was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. Pat Kelsey is 48 years old, so he's not too old of a coach. He will probably, as long as he stays committed to the Louisville Cardinals and he has success, could be there for the next 15 to 20 years. But being born in Cincinnati, Ohio, he has ties to the region. He played college basketball at Wyoming and Xavier as a point guard, and then he was an assistant coach for Wake Forest, an associate head coach for Xavier. Then he got the Winthrop head coaching job, and then he got the Charleston head coaching job a few years ago. But when you look at his record as a head coach, he was 186 and 95 at Winthrop and 110 and 46 in the conference, and he took him to 2 NCAA tournaments, which is very impressive. They never won a game in the tournament. And then he went to Charleston, which I was actually surprised that Pat Kelsey did take the Charleston job, because I thought maybe he would immediately go from Winthrop to a bigger job. But Charleston is a step up from Winthrop, and he had even more success, further validating Pat Kelsey as a good basketball coach. Took him to back-to-back NCAA tournaments, but they were not able to advance. But I am a believer that when you are a head coach of a small school, it's not that big a deal if you do not advance in the NCAA tournament. It's more about getting your team to the tournament, because you're going to be matched up with a better team, and the tournament is all about matchups. We know Shaheen Holloway took St. Peter's to the Elite Eight, and we know that Loyola Chicago with Porter Moser went all the way to the Final Four. Dusty May with Florida Atlantic went all the way to the Final Four. But sometimes you just got to get that first lucky break, beat that first team, and then you can make a run. Pat Kelsey has never been able to do that, but still, he is a good coach. He's won a lot of games. His record as a coach is 261 and 122, but his record at Charleston's even more impressive at 75 and 27, and he's 39 and 15 in conference play with an over 70% winning percentage in both categories. Pete Thamel tweeted it out that Louisville has agreed in principle to a 5-year deal to make Pat Kelsey the school's next head basketball coach. And I did a Twitter poll asking people, do you think Pat Kelsey will succeed? And actually, only 63% of people are saying yes to 36% of people saying no. And I know that a lot of that is because Louisville fans do not believe that Pat Kelsey will be able to turn this thing around. Louisville has been in bad shape after the fallout of the Rick Pitino situation. It has been so bad for Louisville ever since the end of the Rick Pitino era that, like I said, Richard Pitino was a candidate for this job, and I think he would have actually been a solid candidate for the job, but people were concerned in the Louisville administration that because Richard Pitino is just the son of Rick Pitino, and Rick Pitino had all of those issues at the end of his tenure with the scandals and allegations and everything, that they did not want to hire Richard Pitino, which I think is absolutely crazy. The sins of the father should not be thrown on the son. We don't know if Richard Pitino would ever have had the same issues that Rick Pitino has had. He's never been thrown around in any allegations before, but you never know. Anything can happen in the future. But Richard Pitino, as far as we know, would have been a clean candidate for the Louisville Cardinals. But some people also do say that the bark doesn't fall far from the tree. So maybe the Louisville Cardinals used that against Richard Pitino, but I do think he should have been a candidate for the job. And maybe they believe Pat Kelsey's a better candidate than Richard Pitino, but I don't think Richard Pitino shouldn't have got the job just because of Rick Pitino. Josh Schertz was also a candidate, like I said, as well, from Indiana State, but I do think Josh Schertz could possibly be getting the St. Louis job, and maybe there's already some ties there. I thought Chris Collins would have been a good candidate for the Louisville job. He's done a great job at Northwestern at a school that never wins. That's very impressive stuff. So I do think he would have been a good candidate for the job, but that did not occur. I did have somebody comment to my tweet, though, on whether Pat Kelsey would succeed, and the person replied and said, yes, but a ceiling is there. UNC and Duke will still dominate, and Virginia will be there as well. But I don't really think that matters when it comes to the Louisville head coaching job right now. It's not about becoming the best. Succeeding at Louisville is just getting Louisville back to being a perennial NCAA tournament team. And based off what Pat Kelsey has done as a head coach at Winthrop and as a head coach at College of Charleston, he's been able to get his teams to the NCAA tournament. Louisville's in shambles right now. The Kenny Payne era was absolutely terrible. The Chris Mack era had its ups and downs, but that ended poorly. We know what happened with Rick Pitino, but Pat Kelsey is a winner. He's never won at a big level like this, but neither has Dusty May, and the Michigan Wolverines are taking a chance on him. I do agree that there were better candidates for this job. I would have taken Chris Collins over Pat Kelsey. I would have taken Richard Pitino over Pat Kelsey just because he's had that Power 5 coaching experience at Minnesota, even though he was fired, and he's done well at New Mexico. Bob Huggins is the one I was iffy on. I think with his coaching experience in the past, it would have been good, but he does have the baggage of the issues he's had recently, and plus he's over 70 years old, so he wouldn't have been able to be a coach at Louisville long, which I don't think that's always smart to have a stopgap coach. It's good to hire a younger guy that could possibly be your next head coach for the next 15 to 20 years if he does well, but I think Pat Kelsey's got the fire, the energy. His coaching style is very good for modern college basketball. His teams run up and down the floor. They shoot a lot of threes, and I think he will be able to have success in the transfer portal. Louisville's got a lot of NIL, great fan support. They're a team that's won multiple national titles, and I know a lot of people are saying Michigan and West Virginia is a better job than Louisville. The Cardinals are still a great job in college basketball, despite the fact that they have been struggling the last few years. I think they can get back to being one of the better teams in the ACC in the next few years if Pat Kelsey does a good job. And I think possibly the only thing hurting the Louisville Cardinals is because they're in the ACC, and we just don't know what's going to happen with that conference. Is the ACC going to crumble if teams like Clemson and Florida State leave, or will the ACC be able to survive? That's hurting the Louisville Cardinals' appeal for a job right now. That's why I think Dusty May chose the Michigan job. But Pat Kelsey, he's a guy who's been a journeyman in college basketball, going from Winthrop to Charleston. He's now got his first big break, and I think he's going to give it 110% at Louisville, despite the uncertainty with the program being in a conference in the ACC that we don't know what's going to happen, and the fact Louisville's been bad for so long. I think he will be able to succeed at Louisville. I don't think he'll be able to possibly get Louisville back to where they were in the Rick Pitino era, but as long as he can get the Cardinals back to being a perennial NCAA tournament team, which I think he will, then I think overall this was a solid hire for the Louisville Cardinals. It's a safe hire. Some of the other candidates had some baggage, and I get why Louisville doesn't want to go that route with all the issues they've had in the past. So I think Pat Kelsey, despite all the circumstances and all the other names that they had in their coaching search, I think it's a pretty solid hire overall for the Cardinals to hire Pat Kelsey, and hopefully they will be able to start turning their program around and get back to being the program that they used to be. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about Pat Kelsey getting the head coaching job for the Louisville Cardinals, and whether you were blown away like I was that he was the guy that ended up getting the job, and whether you thought it might have possibly been a Bob Huggins or a Richard Pitino who would have gotten the job, and if there were any other candidates that you would have preferred to Pat Kelsey to be the next head basketball coach at Louisville, and whether you think Pat Kelsey can turn Louisville around. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.